Hey everyone, this is Ben Cecchini, founder of Give and Grow, here with another episode of the Give and Grow podcast. For those of you that are new to this podcast, this is our social emotional learning series where we break things down: mental health, emotional health, well-being, different tips, tools, techniques, all the T's from different professionals in the mental health space. And today I'm super excited to introduce you guys to Marissa Damon. Marissa Damon is a school counselor with a master's in education and master's in counseling out of Knox School District in Newcastle, PA. So Marissa, it's a pleasure. It's an honor. How are you doing tonight?
I'm well, thank you, Ben.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, I do want to go a little bit deeper just into this connection here because for those of you that may have tuned into some of Give and Grow's Instagram account, I do mental health talks with middle schools and high schools. And a big part of those talks are a pretty tragic experience that I had in college with one of my college teammates and somebody who I used to rap with, Tim McNerney. And Tim went to Knock High School, where Marissa, is a counselor, well, in that school district. So it just feels extra special to be able to connect with somebody on this topic for something that was super transformational and pivotal in my life in the mental health space. It really led me down this path of exploring the mind. So I'm excited to continue that with somebody from Newcastle, PA here today. So Marissa, can you just break down a little bit about what social emotional learning is, what your approach is, and why it's so important for young children to get these skills?
Sure thing. So social emotional learning, it's really incorporating curriculum that focuses on the whole child, really discussing, emotion identification and really giving a space to, giving strategies of how to identify, emotions on an individual level, but also to, strategies on how to cope. Again, obviously we know what it means when we're happy or joy, but especially some of those tough emotions, such as sadness and, anger, because, developmentally that's looking differently across K to 12 students. But
Mm-hmm.
the earlier we discuss this and teach little kids emotions and giving them that space that it's okay, um, emotions are not good or bad, they just are. So just
Mm-hmm.
really discussing that and giving strategies, um, that's what social emotional learning is all about, and really kind of transforming those skills across their lives, not just in an academic setting such as school, but outside, community.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah. You mentioned the strategies for identifying emotions, and that seems to be through a lot of these conversations that I've had, like the very first thing that we can start introducing with young kids. Just like, what are you feeling? What is this energy that's moving on inside of you, and potentially why is it there? You mentioned strategies there. Can you talk about some of the strategies that you use in your school that help kids develop that skill of identifying what these emotions are?
Sure, absolutely. So I have a poster in my office, a series of 20 so emotions. Some are simple, such as happy and sad, and some are a little bit more complex, such as, jealousy or, disgust. But again, as children, um, you know, grow up, obviously, even though they don't know what that is, because as we all know, basic emotions, but as we grow up, those can transform into more complex emotions. And again, the biggest skill is just identifying them. And even though, again, they might not know what that is, depending on situation, because everything is very situational as well. As
Mm,
kids, or even adults experience things, very differently. So it's not a one size fits all.
right. But
But I like to,
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. I was just gonna say, the movie Inside Out, that's
Hmm.
a great depiction, and I really like to lean on that. Um, those examples for my students, because again, they're younger, but it's a nice um, depiction because they can see it and they can, a visual depiction of what an emotion might look like, as opposed because emotions we can't see them. We're talking about an abstract thought.
Right. And that makes it so much more challenging, and why it's important to have the poster use the emojis to be able to be like, oh, this is kind of like uh, the faces that we might make when we're feeling this, right? And then to your point, when we get that characterization in a movie like Inside Out, it's once again like, oh, that's something that we can better understand, especially at a young age. So I love that movie as well. If you haven't watched that with your kids, highly suggest it. That's super helpful. But I love, and you're not the only one that uses these posters. And these are things that people can just like get online, right? Like they can just have up in the play area, or just have it around, so that these
Teachers
kids
pay
can.
teachers is great. Hmm.
Okay, teachers pay teachers. They got a lot of resources on there as well.
Hmm.
Okay, okay, there we go. There we go. So once we start, or once you kind of have these kids, and they're starting to learn potentially even some of these more complex emotions, jealousy, disgust, um, what's your kind of next step in their growth process, or like what would you go to next?
So just really, obviously, if students feeling that way, because that's and more, I don't want to say extreme, but an overwhelming emotion, because again, it's more so upset. And as we break down to whatever the situation is, depending on, we'll say if it's a peer conflict, because again, between 9 to 11-year olds, you're really talking about friendship dynamics because again, developmentally, there's a lot of developmental, preteen stuff going on. So not only, again, students who don't know what those basic emotions are, when you have just the, hormonal development going on, you're also having that into the mix. So my next step is really, you know, dissecting, going over, what is it that we're talking about, what the issue is, and then really walking it back with the emotions. At least that's what I'm finding, especially post COVID. A lot of these kiddos now, granted, they were, preschool, kindergarten when COVID hit. But again, that essential piece of not no emotion identification, it's really we're working backwards. It's challenging working
Hmm.
that backwards.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can totally see that being a challenge. So when you're talking about that, you said like 9 to 11 year olds, somewhere in there, 9 to 12. So in
Mm-hmm.
that age, you're really starting to notice like, okay, they need a little bit more of these relationship skills, but you still tie it back to the emotional skills, because those are the things that are coming up in a conflict with a peer. Maybe being left out, maybe their peer group is changing, whatever sort of relationship drama might be going on in the elementary school, or at home, those sorts of spaces, in sports and extracurriculars. So you're tying it back into the emotion skills, or the emotional awareness. What what do you feel like parents can do, in that situation where they might be noticing it? Like, what are some of the things, as you're tying it back, that are helpful for you in supporting your students?
Just parents and caregivers giving the space to talk. And I'm sure we've all been there, coming off the bus from school, parents, caregivers are asking, how's your day? Oh, it was good. And that's the end of the conversation. But
Mm-hmm.
really ask the questions of, how was lunch? How was recess?
Mm,
Did you,
mm.
if obviously parents, I empower parents, they know their kids the best, and just really empower them with that. So, if they know that, they have a test coming up or just having homework, kind of tie something in that they may or already know about, and then follow up with that question.
Gotcha.
Open-ended questions are yes or no.
Yes, the open-ended question, and then also it sounds like just getting a little more specific. Like, how was the
Mm-hmm.
day is pretty generic, but dialing in that question, I could see that being really powerful. Then it gives a kid something to kind of dial in as well. Like, oh, that specific part of the day, what was happening? Um, cool, cool. And so if we're identifying these emotions, we're having these scenarios that are coming up in our young kids, relationships, friendships, siblingships, is that a word? I don't know, but you know what I'm saying, brother and sister dynamics. What are some effective ways to teach kids about actually regulating their emotions and, yeah, navigating the stuff that comes up.
Mhm. So again, just regulating again, it's going back to the basics because if you can't really regulate it unless you don't know what you're talking about, but just some of the strategies I know, I go teach my students, star breathing or square breathing. So this could be
Mhm.
a visual, drawing a simple square. We make one line of a square, we breathe in, and then we draw the next line and we pause, and then the next line we go up, we breathe out, and then we pause again. hmm
Yes, there
So
we
you can
go.
shapes, stars, squares, triangles, that might sound like geometry class, but it's really effective because the whole point of that is to really have that chance of pause and to really
Mhm.
be dialed into what, you know, we're doing at that moment. Because let's face it, kids with tablets, Chromebooks, they're like adults in the sense they're so dialed in with technology. And
Mhm.
technology is great, for educational settings, I mean, in today's world. But I think we need to remember to pause. And that's just
Yeah.
kind of pivotal, especially with SEL.
Yeah, yeah, I totally feel that, and I'm a big proponent of breathing techniques and breath work or advocate, I'll say, and these things do work in helping to get kids present. We our thoughts, our minds can be pum 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 bouncing all around so fast that creates a lot of anxiety and tension. We don't really know how much anxiety and tension we're building up because that's almost like the state of our house, the state of our school, the state of the world, but being able to take these moments to pause helps us recognize, oh shoot, I might be clenching my jaw or my body's tight, or you know what, there's actually some like nervousness or sadness that's here that I've just been kind of avoiding on my Chromebook, on my tablet throughout my day. So it really gives them a chance to also connect with how they're feeling, what's actually present in their body and their mind in the moment. Are there any other like outside of breathing techniques that you like to lean on?
So I have a variety of fidgets and I have like a mini shredder. Um, Students love that. So even whatever that's bothering them, whether that's, using your word as siblingship or whatever's going on, they'll write, the name or the strip of whatever's bothering them, and then they'll just shred it. Just actively shredding that is just a sense, like it's destroyed, it's no longer, we're moved on from that. So
I
just
love
that's
that.
a simple, we're done.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Me and my wife have done something similar, but I never heard it in the like shredding context or like with a kid. We'll like write something out and potentially burn it. Like same sort of idea where it's like it's just symbolic of I'm ready to let this go. We're ready to move on. I love that. A mini shredder in the counselor's office. That's golden right there. And I'm sure you can put like fears, doubts, all types of stuff in that, and just like let it go. I'm moving on.
Mhm. Now, like I said, I do have an array of fidgets, and you know, I'm not a play therapist by any means, specifically, but the kids are drawn to fidgets because if they get their hands moving, it kind of lets their mind wander.
Hmm.
Even we're talking about something generic. Go, tell me about your pet. What's your favorite color? And then as the kiddos more drawn into the fidget or whatever, how I don't want to say coloring because that's more of a calm down, but then that fidget helps them like, okay, this is safe. My fingers are like, busy. So then it's kind of like
Hmm.
one of those, okay, they're talking about something in a non-threatening way because they're chilled out, it's calm and then so
Right.
on forth.
And I think I love that you bring that up, especially because you have these one on ones with so many different kids, so many different types of kids, and you're seeing this as an effective tool. I think I just want to shout out that sometimes I coach a lot of kids, and I might see that their eyes are wandering or they're looking down and it doesn't feel like they're focusing, right? It can be like kind of frustrating at times because it's like this kid's not even paying attention to what's going on here. But hearing from you, like they're sitting down, they're playing, it gives them something to focus on. These kids are able to multitask, I think, in a lot of different settings. And if you're saying here that through that, they're able to open up and kind of just like let loose and have this non threatening space, like that's powerful right there. It's a lot different than like having a sit down face to face, don't move, eye contact. Like that can create a lot of pressure and stress, right?
Hmm. Now I
Yeah.
also created a calming corner, which I have one of those like giant, you know, boho seats. And when I always give my students choice to sit, and then wherever they sit or wherever they're led to, and that again, it's all about empowering the student and giving them a little choice, especially because students they don't have a whole lot of choice.
Hmm. I'm sorry. Can you just repeat that last part? I want to make sure I followed it. You said especially if the student what?
Especially if students don't have a lot of choice, because you figure, when they're in a school setting, they're learning, math, reading, science, social studies, STEAM, it's all important. But again, as kids get older, part of our job, they're going to have more choices to make as they get older. And even if it's pick this or that, that's powerful in itself
Mm-hmm. Got you.
because
So that's
giving them
your
the chance to exercise a little bit of choice.
Yeah, and that's a whole part of social emotional learning as well, right? Responsible decision making. How can we expect our kids to make responsible decisions if we're deciding everything for them, what they're going to read, what they're going to learn, where to sit, all these different use a number two pencil, like
Right, right.
that's powerful right there. I really appreciate you dropping that in there, and to your point, even if it's something small, empowering them to make that choice. What's something that you'd like to like remind parents when things get challenging or chaotic, if they get frustrated or overwhelmed, that you think might help them out?
Consistency at home, whatever that structure is. Again, if you're going to ask, the questions, how was your day? How was your week? You know, have, I remember growing up sitting around the dinner table, and that's when a lot of those, discussions were had, and it created, you know, that was like the time, everybody might have went around the table. Some people, if they didn't want to talk, it was just the pass. It was non-threatening, because everyone, you know, traditionally, eats dinner, catches a break, catches up with each other, and then that's it. And then obviously, you can follow up, but that was, consistent every night.
I can see that being
And
really powerful.
if not, then, even if it's a morning walk to the bus, whatever parents, your individual routine is with your child, just incorporate that. It does not have to be, over the top. Now, I would caution not before bed, because when you're trying to go before bed, that could lead down, you know, kids, if they don't want to go to bed, you might be up till midnight, and then, it's a
Right.
whole thing. But just, try to be consistent on whatever time that is.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Just being consistency is key. And especially with this work, I think it's important to just bring up at this point in the conversation like, this is a lifelong process, social emotional learning, right? Like, we're constantly learning about our emotions. Emotions are coming and going all the time, so we're constantly going to be experiencing the whole spectrum of this variety here, and so that's why I think these skills are so powerful. And you're talking about like developmentally the emotions kind of changing or expanding their how they feel, the complexities of those emotions. Speaking of that, just like, because it can be overwhelming even for a young kid, for an adult, like how can parents help to foster a healthy sense of self-esteem, of confidence that like, you might fail, you might mess up, through this process of learning about these emotions, but yeah, how can parents help foster that confidence and high self-esteem?
Um, Actually, Ben, just the sentence you just said, sometimes addressing the kid, be like, yeah, if this situation or you're feeling a sad emotion, that's okay, and that's going to happen, because
Mm,
unfortunately, as we know, life is not always rainbows and sunshines. So
right.
again, and even as adults, I feel like sometimes as adults we might forget. It's you know my mantra is, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay.
Mm,
So and obviously as adults, with children, we want to protect them, and obviously within reason with that. But again, this is where parents should know your child as they get older, especially middle school. Unfortunately, things, no, we can't protect them from everything either.
hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think to your point, if we're trying to protect them or trying to make the choices for them, we're not empowering them and we're not giving them the opportunity to build that resiliency, right? Being able to,
Mm-hmm.
if we're protecting them all the time, how are they going to be able to bounce back when they get knocked down or made fun of or meet those challenging situations, a breakup, a friend group change or shun, like it's, I think these life situations are so important. And I think to your point, it comes back to that uh, consistency that we provide as parents, as caregivers, showing up for them when those things do get challenging and reminding them of your mantra, which I love. It's okay to not be okay.
And also too, and all too, it's important. It's okay to ask for help. Even if
Mm,
even if parents, you might be at a loss, or kids, you don't know who to go to for help because you're not going to always be at home. Just go over who are those people you identify with, whether that's, a church community, a school community, your teacher, your counselor, whoever that
mm-hmm,
is. Because
mm-hmm.
again, it does take a village.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's an important call to action too. If you don't feel like you have that, I think that gets to be moved up the priority list, like they're so important to have those people that you can turn to. And I want to just share that, especially those people out in Newcastle or Knock, like this is why your position exists, Marissa, like so that people can reach out. You can be that safe space for any student that walks through those doors or needs to walk through those doors. There are these support systems in place in your school district, wherever you're at, whether you know them or get to know them.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's really really powerful right there. There is a village. We can tap into it. Marissa, is there anything else? There was one question that popped to my mind, but it kind of came and went. But like, what is like one thing you would say that would make everything else in this mental health, social emotional learning space just easier or even unnecessary? Like, what's the one thing that's so important to you?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I would say not easier. I would, because, again, so I was in grad school during COVID, so my training has been, pretty impeccable, and I worked in education several years for, post COVID. So I compare a lot between what education was like before and after, and it's mind blowing. It's exciting because I can tell you it's not the same as it was. So I feel like, as society, we're still just kind of figuring it out. And especially, I feel like the role of school counselors have definitely, you know, transformed in a way, because, school counselors, the origin was vocational guidance counselors, and, focused on, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, we're more than that. Just, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Mm,
We are, again, collaborators with parents, administrators, and students. And
mm-hmm.
at the high school level, as you get older, yeah, that career college pieces, becomes essential, because again, students graduate. The goal is to graduate, be a successful adult with a career, a job, and a path.
Mm-hmm.
But, social emotionally, again, career college, that's not going to happen if we don't have the social emotional piece either along with that.
Right.
It's really
And
twofold.
we kind of missed that question early on, so I'm glad we're kind of circling back around. Like, how, in your experience, whether you've looked at research or just, whether you've seen these kids develop in this way, how important is social emotional learning to like academic career success? Like, in what ways do you see that supporting that future for these kids?
It's, imperative. It's totally imperative, especially, seeing even like the conversation of AI, kids like, it's here and like these kids, as they go through their educational process, it's gonna be it's different world that, you and I grew up in, and that's not a
Mm-hmm.
bad thing. It's just, again, AI, we have to remember who we are. Because, again, we're making the decisions. It's not AI that's doing everything for
Mm-hmm.
them or us.
Right. I love
But
that.
just to be,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna add there, it's up to us to really, you know, rewrite that, because if we don't, then we're going to lose that component.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, all these changes are happening and going on. Technology is advancing so rapidly. To your point, I loved it. Remember who we are, and we're these complex human beings that have these emotions that they play such a role in our health, in our quality of life, in our relationships, our connections with the world around us, AI, our friends, our family, nature, our jobs and roles in society. So remembering who we are just feels so fitting in this day and age. And a huge part of that separates us from any computer, any technology, is the social and emotional aspects of who we are. And I think that right there is why this podcast exists, because it's that important. Um, Marissa, I want to just like thank you for sparking this conversation today, for sharing all the things that you did. There's so many little nuggets in here that just I hope people walk away with, not only walk away with, but put into practice. Whether you recognize you could use a little more consistency, or that you get that little poster in your play corner, or a fidget, or the little shredder. Like all these things, they're little, they're small, but they make a big difference, and they all contribute to this lifelong learning process. If anybody wanted to get in touch with you, Marissa, like how could they do that?
They can go on my LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Send a message. Again, Knox School District. I'm out there. So,
There we go. There we go. Thank you so much once again for your time, and everybody out there that gave this whole podcast a listen. Thank you as well. We hope you share it. We hope you spread the word, especially if you found it helpful, informational, inspirational. So, Marissa, thank you so much once again.
you.